Welcome to the Open Loop podcast, a youth led space for deep, curiosity driven conversations exploring the ideas, technologies, and systems shaping our past, present, and future. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Youth Action Now, the Canada Service Corps, and the Social Planning Council of Ottawa for supporting this project and believing in our vision. For today's episode, I'm speaking with Marie, a multilingual youth leader navigating diplomacy, identity, and education, with a vision for rethinking what global citizenship really means. Hello, Marie, and thank you for being here with us today.
Hello, Lena. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's quite an honor to be here.
So I'll just dive right into it. And at first, I wanted to start with you're graduating early, a year early.
Oh, yes.
So I'd love to hear about how that decision came about and what motivated it.
So, to get started, I think the question that I'm always met with when I mention that I'm graduating a year early is the fact that many people didn't know it was possible, although it really is possible, in fact. So, for some context, the current school that I'm at, I've been there since grade 7, since it's a 7 to 12 school. And I recall back in middle school, specifically in grade 7, my teacher mentioning that it was possible to graduate high school in 3 years instead of 4 years through completing a series of various and condensed summer courses. With that said, I always knew that graduating early was possible, again, and it was an idea in the back of my head, but I didn't take it into consideration up until grade 9. And the decision for that was mainly was motivated through a series of unfortunate events through grade 9 and freshman year of high school. Going into high school from middle school, it's not the same as transitioning from high school and university. I'd say that just the overall sort of system in itself is very different. Not only are you more responsible of yourself and there's a lot less help, but as we're teenagers and we're growing, we definitely do see a lot of shifts in behavior. And when I mention unfortunate events, I consider them unfortunate in the sense that the biggest aspect was that I lost all my friends after the summer of grade 8. And I think the biggest and drastic and most obvious shift going into high school was the fact that I started wearing the hijab. Um, held a lot of guilt going into grade 9 and wearing the hijab, mainly because I was valedictorian in my grade 8 graduation, and many didn't know that I was Muslim at all because I have a pretty Western sounding first name and I don't particularly speak with an accent. So a lot of people were unaware of that fact. And so going into high school in grade 9, not only is that transition from middle school to high school super drastic, but also adding on the fact that I had completely lost contact with everybody. I was very alone and I began to also build up these feelings of um, not only guilt, but shame and insecurity. And not only that, but going to a high school, especially where there's the IB program, I kept constantly comparing myself to others, feeling unintelligent, not smart enough. And because going to such an environment where there's a lot of people as well who are not only smart, but are just very well rounded and overachieving in extracurriculars, I really just felt like I was out of place. For the majority of grade 9, I was actually very miserable in grade 9. And so with these factors and even beyond these factors themselves, I grade 9 was just very tough. And so I recall at the time going to my guidance counselor during course selection period and telling her about all these courses that I wanted to do outside of school. I was already like doing like language classes on Saturdays and language classes for another language outside of school hours on during the week, so Tuesdays and Thursdays. and I told her about all these, like, course ideas that I had in mind. It was the course selection period that was going on at the time, so I think it was, like, February of grade 9, and I told her that I want to, like, fast track all of these courses. Um, Now I remember coming out of that meeting kind of thinking about this whole idea of just fast tracking, and I went home that day and I talked to my sister and I was like, "Hey, what would you think about graduating a year early if I did that?" And she was like, "I'm totally in support of that." And so going forward, we both sat down and wrote down all the courses that I was taking that year, and we were very strategic about it. And we planned out all the summer courses that I would need in order to open up these certain courses. I emphasize summer courses mainly because the high school that I'm at is non-semestered, and so that does obviously pose a very obvious disadvantage in the sense that you aren't able to obtain your prerequisite credits until the end of the year, unlike a semester at school where you would take, let's just say, grade 11 math the first semester and then be able to take grade 12 math the second semester. That wasn't really available for me, unfortunately. It was just an external factor. So going forward, I proposed the graduation plan to my guidance counselor and, of course, with my parents' approval, and she was convinced and she took me very seriously. And I was honestly super grateful because there's a lot of people at the time. Well, there are quite a lot of people out there who might have had the idea of graduating a year early, but it might have not been approved by their school counselors. So that's something that I'm definitely very grateful for. And so with that said, the summer going into what was supposed to be quote unquote grade 10, I did double summer school taking grade 10 science and to open up my grade 11 sciences. And then in August, I took grade 11 biology. And it was not easy sacrificing my summers for two intensely condensed courses, but I managed to do it. And so the following school year, I did like a hybrid of grade 10 and grade 11 courses, of course, with a combination of online courses to meet the graduation requirements. And I'm now happy to say that I have completed all my grade 11 and 10 required graduation courses, with recently completing my summer school course in July was the last grade 11 credit that I was missing, which was English. And so, yeah, this upcoming school year, I will be fully in grade 12 with my courses being all in B4U for M level. And I can't wait for this new chapter ahead and for university soon. I am nervous. I can't wait for all the surprises to come. I definitely am somebody pretty optimistic. So, yeah, that's basically just the rundown of as to why I wanted to graduate a year early high school.
Lots of exciting things going on. But I think you touched on some really important points, especially with our school board, unfortunately. Like I think you're right, the possibility of graduating early is practically never mentioned.
It's not
You see it like occasionally and it's very much discouraged because the minute you bring it up to your student counselor or your guidance counselor, they'll just go on about, oh, what about your rest, your burnout, you feel what if you feel exhausted, this, that. And it's like it's taken from in my experience at least, it's taken from a point of like w- we've seen things and we know what's gonna happen without really discussing it with your agency in mind.
for
I
sure.
found really struggled with that at some points because like
I actually did burn out. So when it comes to, of course, sacrificing your summers and you mentioning especially the aspect of resting, I really didn't take that into account. I just was really naive at first about the whole thing. And so I actually burnt out really badly after the summer going into my hybrid grade 10 and 11. Um, it wasn't really easy. And I guess that's just the sacrifice that comes with while making such a decision, especially. Um, it affected my grades. And I remember there was like a very dark period in December up until March of that school year, just feeling completely, utterly exhausted. And guys, like you said, and you had mentioned, that's why a lot of school counselors just don't bring it up. It's not that it's not possible, it's rather just there are these concerning factors that come along with doing something like that. So, yeah.
That's understandable. Yeah, I think it would still be somewhat like more helpful in if guidance counselors sat down and co-planned your future with you rather than like telling you what
Yeah,
to
I
do and
think it's
almost
just the discouraging aspect of it. It's just what really sucks.
yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than walking into a guidance meeting and walking out feeling unsupported, feeling worse than you walked
Well,
in.
yeah,
Yeah, I had my guidance counselor was great. I'll give them credit. The only issue is that there were so many school policies that I just sat there and it was like my well-being is at risk, but you're putting some ridiculous school policy that I know other schools in our school board didn't have, and I feel unsupported. So I think yeah, the guidance counselor system definitely needs some improvement at the very least. But yeah, also I'm super impressed by what you did. You were juggling quite a lot because you did the ICP program as well. And
you thought I
for
was doing
context,
extracurriculars on top of graduating a year early. So,
yeah, for context, she did two two summer courses while managing an opportunity to go to Japan
yep,
last summer. So yeah, we'll go into that later, and we'll also probably hopefully have time to discuss identity, hijab, and yeah, I can, as a fellow hijabi wearer, I can quite relate to that. But I want to go back to pre high school Marie.
yep.
I I'd like to hear about what growing up in Libya was like, and then when you moved to Ottawa, how was finding spaces, youth spaces, and engagement spaces that you were interested in happened? What was that process like?
For sure. For context, I was born and raised in Libya until the age of 2 years old. That's when my family moved to Canada. It's a little bit of a complicated story. I was born a Canadian citizen because my parents had immigrated before. And due to personal reasons, they had to move back. But I was born a dual citizen. And so we moved back in 2011. And yeah, I've grown up in Ottawa ever since. I did move back a little bit in Libya to live there just for a few years in elementary school, but and that's where I also learned like the brink of my Arabic, how to read and write and all of that because I went to just regular public school there. But yeah, finding youth spaces to go. I would say that I was always pretty engaged within the community. In middle school, there were clubs, uh, so on and so forth. I always just had this leader mentality inside of me, and I always wanted to lead and be a part of stuff. I didn't really do much, to be quite frank. It wasn't really until high school, honestly. I joined my public library to be a part of to be a part of their teen volunteer crew slash initiative. And that's when this whole idea or just being a part of an initiative revol- revolving and being surrounded by youth really just ignited like a passionate fire internally within me. I really loved it. Being able to work, I was specifically working as a volunteer for their weekly and sometimes occasionally scheduled children's programs and just talking to the staff, talking to the library visitors and being able to help and assist in whatever way I could. That and of course being able to just support my community in that aspect. Like I said, I felt really good about that. And so going forward, yeah, I joined quite a lot of school clubs as well. I'm grateful that I'm at a school where there are plenty of clubs to join. And with that, I actually applied for quite a lot of executive positions when those were offered at certain clubs. And I I wrote quite a lot of heartfelt things on in the supplementary sections of the executive applications. And yeah, no, I actually became executive of quite a few clubs. I was already like executive, I think like three clubs by the time I finished grade 9. So Yeah, no, I was just like really out there. In grade 9, I mainly prioritized in school initiatives more rather than outside of school initiatives. That was mainly more towards the recent year with me discovering a little bit more of my passions just because back in grade 9, I was really uncertain of what I wanted to do. Um, s- in regards to career prospects and whatnot. But yeah, no, it was really thanks to the public library that I was able to find myself and my passion for civic engagement. And so that's pretty much it. In regards to Youth Ottawa, I'd say I just knew that I wanted to be a part of a much larger initiative. And I just happened to hear about it from a few mutual connections that I had. And so I applied on a whim, actually. I forgot that I even like just typed in my email and to be a part of their mailing list. And one day I just got an email saying that congratulations, you're a part of it. And I was like, oh wow, that's cool. But no, ever since being a part of it, it's just been incredible. Being
Yeah, the Ottawa Youth Council is wonderful.
uh-huh.
I've been part of it for a few years now. But yeah, it's interesting to see your growth and, like, as you mentioned, finding yourself. I think what's super interesting about the high school journey is like the process of finding yourself and feeling comfortable in your skin. And it does get better. When I look back from like grade 9 to grade 12, there was so much happened. I tried quite a few things, and by the end of it, I felt quite confident in knowing what I'd wanted and knowing what I'm interested in. Of course, there's still a lot more to do, and there's still like, what do I want to do for my career and such. But yeah, it's the process is like amazing. But yeah, so I know you kind of touched on this
Yep.
in your last couple of answers, but if you could elaborate, since moved between Libya and Canada, and you also visited quite a few
Yep.
countries, you speak multiple languages, foreign languages, and just generally is super globally engaged. You have lots of international friends that you've volunteered with, international students recently. So global engagement, you're the go-to person. So I guess I'd like to hear about how this altogether has shaped your sense of identity and belonging, or how it is currently doing that. Or yeah, feel free to go with
For
which
sure.
direction.
So just the linguistic aspect. Obviously, I grew up trilingual, actually. Ethnically, I'm Amazigh. They're a tribe that extends from just particularly northern African countries such as Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya as well. So growing up, I heard Amazigh being spoken, and obviously at home I spoke in Arabic, and then in school it was English. I wasn't in French immersion. I grew up in a pretty like Anglophone part of Ottawa, the PN. It wasn't really later
All right.
until I picked up French. But
I'll
anyways,
just add
mhm,
for context for anyone listening, the Amazigh people are basically indigenous people of North
yeah,
Africa. Yeah, so you pretty much spot on.
yeah.
Yeah, across North Africa.
Yeah, across Northern Africa. And yeah, in regards to what really opened up my eyes to the world and global citizenship was actually this summer going into high school. Before that, I went on this like crazy world trip. I visited Europe, I visited North Africa, and also obviously explored quite a few parts of just North America, Canada, and US. But it was, like, the first time where I visited I think I, like, visited 8 or 7 countries that summer, and it was just so incredible. It was, like, Tunisia, Libya, Morocco, and then obviously it was, like, the UK, France, Germany, and then I went to the US, and it was just so incredible, and I was, like, really intrigued by just the overall societies there, how they functioned, and it was truly a very eye-opening experience. I think that was definitely the biggest motivator when it came to just wanting to increase my global awareness and as well as my linguistic skills. I remember that year I picked up French. I took it a lot more seriously just because Canada is a bilingual country and there's, especially living in Ottawa, there is definitely quite a lot of opportunities that comes with being bilingual in English and French. So I picked up French and it definitely helped a lot because I did go to Belgium and France during my whole world tour, as I like to call, as I like to say to my friends, and it was super, super duper cool. Going into grade 9 after that incredible trip, I took Spanish in so I took Spanish. It was grade 10 level Spanish just because all language courses in Ontario that are not French typically start at the grade 10 level and in the grade 12. So they're only 3 years, not 4 years. So I took us every Saturday Spanish. I always been intrigued by Hispanic, Latin American, as well countries, and was intrigued by just like the Spanish colonization, and just the language itself was just really beautiful. The culture and just like in every country, every Hispanic country's individual culture really intrigued me. So I picked up Spanish, and then I'm a huge anime lover and just Japanese culture appreciator, and so I took Japanese as well. Because after taking Spanish, I always in the back, I feel like a lot of listeners can relate that growing up here in Canada, you always just assume that French is just like the language that you have to learn, or that it's the most useful language after English in terms of just job opportunities. But the reality is that there is no really, whilst it's a very important language, I highly recommend that you learn. It's also quite beautiful on its own. It's never too little or too much to, or not, how do I put it? Important to learn other languages besides French, and learning Spanish and Japanese. It also just really ignited like a fire within me, and it's when I discovered like my passion and love for language learning. And so, yeah, going forward, I continued with French. I also picked up Korean actually back in middle school. Um, I'm a huge fan of Korean dramas and K-pop. And I learned how to read and write, and because I, like, continuously expose myself to Korean dramas, I eventually did pick up a little bit of Korean, and so, yeah, by the time, like, grade 9 finished, I could speak, besides my 3 native languages, which are English, Arabic, and Amazigh, I could speak Spanish, I could speak Japanese, and I could speak Korean. So, yeah, oh, and French. Can't forget about French, of course. Yeah, so 7, which is crazy to think about now. And I recently just picked up my 8th language, which is Italian, which is super duper cool. Now, I do want to say one thing, and that the biggest reason as to why I was able to continuously be motivated to just expand my cultural awareness besides just languages was because of the International Certificate Program, which, for those who don't know, it's a program, a part of the OCDSB, so you don't necessarily have to be a part of a school. It is a part of, rather, the whole district school board. And it is a program for those interested in global citizenship, global awareness, of course, languages, and just overall expanding their world horizons. There are many opportunities to be involved, whether that is through volunteering for many initiatives, going to events held by embassies. We're grateful to live in Ottawa, where there's quite a lot of embassies here and a lot of headquarters for certain companies here as well. So that's definitely very convenient. Yeah, this program, I had my older sister as well. I hadn't known a few people who had done it, and it sounded really fun. And so, yeah, I literally applied like September the 2nd that I got into high school. There are actually quite a few components for this program. There's a linguistic component where you need like 4 la- language credits besides French, as well as there's an intercultural communication aspect where you need to join this meeting and you basically network with people that are also interested in global citizenship. And then finally, the biggest aspect of it all, the last component and biggest component of it all, is just the overall cultural communication, cultural exposure hours. So that can be through not only, it actually, watching dramas is actually considered to be a part of this, but it could also be through volunteering. I remember the first place that I volunteered for as a part of the ICP, which by the way did also account for volunteer hours for school, was the Greek Film Festival. I got to watch and actually learn about sort of Greek cinema, as well as meet some quite incredible people, watch some good films, and so on and so forth. I got to volunteer. I eventually was able to go to the Japanese embassy, volunteer there, as well as just attend a lot of workshops, cultural workshops there in regards to Japanese food, Japanese cinema, obviously anime being a big one, J-pop, so on and so forth. The Korean embassy, this is also something that we're definitely going to touch upon, but there's also forums. There's obviously exchanges, which do also count for the larger component. I, with ICP, had the opportunity to go to Japan and South Korea, which, oh my goodness, absolute childhood dream accomplished. I was actually, in fact, the first person in my family to step foot in Asia, the first female and the youngest. So that was just incredible. And I did it without my parents. It was also my first time traveling without my parents as well, which is also crazy. But no, I had an absolute blast in those two countries thanks to ICP. So yeah, just in general, I'd say it's truly because of that program actually that I was able to really continue being motivated to be a part of, or sorry, continue being motivated to just enhance my cultural and linguistic knowledge in terms of exchanges. I'm really looking forward to going to Chengdu, China, hopefully. I just want to complete the trilogy of Japan, Korea, and China. So that's pretty much it.
Lots of exciting stuff, lots of firsts as well, I'm hearing.
Yep.
And one more thing I'm adding to the list of things OCDSB should tell people about more.
Yeah, it's definitely very not it's not advertised enough, I feel like. It really should be. It's been spoken about a couple of times in my classes, but just not enough.
Mhm.
There are a lot of exchanges, even just like the exchange aspect in itself. Like I don't really hear a lot of people in Ottawa specifically just going on study abroads. There's a difference between exchanges and study abroads, but just in general, it's not something that's like heavily advertised or even encouraged, which honestly really sucks. I highly recommend it for anybody. ICP in it within itself offers like certain programs. I know there's one coming up next year. I have a few friends actually from school who are going to do it. It's the 6 week Nice, Provence, and Lyon exchange in France for those who want to obviously improve their French. There's plenty, of course. But yeah, like you said, it's very much underrated.
Yeah, I think I heard about it sometime in grade 8 or grade 7.
Mhm.
Grade 8, probably. And then I kind of forgot about it, mainly because I remember distinctly that the website did not provide details about what the ICP was about. The
Mhm.
philosophy was something I'm interested in, like oh, you're going to be culturally engaged and all that. That sounded interesting. But what did that look like in real life? There wasn't a lot of concrete information in their website. I think it's now a bit better, but still lots of improvement. I also noticed it's a common pattern in Ottawa and in Canada that resources are kind of decentralized and there's so many organizations and contributing parties, I guess, to the community,
For
but
sure.
there's no centralized way to find everything. I think if some work can be done on that aspect, it'd be great for youth and for anyone looking to get engaged, to be more engaged. But yeah, I think I know a lot of people in Maryville do it as well, and yeah, everyone I know who's in the program has really wonderful experiences with it, and I think you can get a scholarship for some
Yep.
programs through the ICP. So
The ICP in itself isn't just about doing language classes or volunteering or attending events. Through the ICP, honestly, I was also just able to meet so many incredible people. It's not only a part, the ICP itself isn't a part of the district school board. The actual sort of uh people that run this, they're called OCNet for short, the Ottawa Carleton Network something. It's not just the OCGSB. It's I think the OCNet I think is the one that deals with just bringing international students, specifically high school students over. So yeah, they also run the ICP as well. And I, through ICP, was able to meet so many international students and volunteer with them and show them around Ottawa. And it's actually one of the reasons why I'm not only just culturally and globally aware through my own personal motivations, but it's also through just meeting so many people from just all around the world, from Japan, from obviously various European countries, Asian countries, South American countries. This summer itself, I volunteered with exchange students from Colombia, Spain, China, Japan, Argentina, and the Czech Republic, and in Italy, just to name a few. There's quite a lot others. And it was just so eye-opening and just such an incredible experience. They're obviously coming here to improve their English and just being there to assist them and help them and us being able to exchange our cultures. It's something very lovely, and I wanna say it's very much beyond, um, just I feel like everyone when I mention language is always like things academics. It's really not. It's definitely a part of it, but it's just truly about having fun in all honesty. So that's just something that I wanted to mention there.
For sure. I remember I did a brief visit to Turkey when I was like 6 or 5.
Cool.
And at that point, I wasn't speaking English. I was still in Morocco. It was French and Arabic mostly. So there was me with my no English. Our host family in Turkey didn't really speak English either. So it was like occasionally with the struggling with Google Translate, and occasionally just figuring it out with like signs and hand gestures and all. But it was a super nice experience because like you go from day one where you're like super wary and super like, oh, feeling shy and such, and then last day you're feeling like quite literally like family. But yeah, I think exchanges are definitely a cool experience that I hope everyone gets to experience at least at some point. If not in high school, then in university or eventually. But I do want to focus a bit more on languages. So languages, you've talked that you've taken like quite a few courses and picked up a few languages. Very impressive roster of languages, might I say. But I would like to hear about what draws you to languages more. If you, yeah, I know you touched on that as well, but
Yeah,
if
I
you want
can
to
definitely
elaborate,
elaborate.
and if there's anything like relating it to diplomacy, we'll dive into diplomacy more later in this episode. But also, I just want to hear. Do you think language learning is a diplomatic tool in itself, and how has it changed the way you see people and ideas? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the biggest reason that I'm so drawn to languages in the first place is just mainly because of like the social aspect. I'm definitely someone who's very socially outgoing. I'm very naturally outgoing and extroverted. And I found that with languages, when you're speaking someone's native language, for example, a lot of people don't speak in a lot of actually English is like the language with the most non-native speakers. Most people, it's their second, fourth. It was definitely my second, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, that social aspect in the sense I found I was able to communicate with people a lot more deeper in their own native languages. And even then, like I was just always amazed by the fact that I was able to understand I was able to understand people on a deeper level, but it was just always cool to see their reactions, and I always loved when I all of a sudden surprised them that I could speak their languages. I feel like it's become a trend as well on social media where you see a lot of those polyglots just going out on the streets and you're like, "Hey, I think I can speak your language," and just seeing people just become people being very impressed and also just like releasing all their tension and since they're able to obviously express themselves in their native languages, which I think is just really cool. I found that with languages, I was able to sort of create a lot more deeper bonds with people and be able to, like I said, understand people on a deeper level. And with languages, of course, comes just the overall cultural knowledge. Um, and I really do emphasize that with languages, you can definitely break a lot of obvious barriers. And I know that we said that we would touch upon diplomacy. Is that okay to touch upon now? Just because it does relate. Like, so, yeah,
Sorry, go for it. Yeah.
yeah. So I find that languages, I feel like this isn't really spoken about enough as much as it is truly about breaking obvious barriers, is for what it seems to most people that I have met. I think emphasizing that social connection when we're looking at diplomacy from more of a geopolitical, or a political aspect, because that's like the idea or the connotation that's held around the word diplomacy. Languages is something, just overall breaking linguistic barriers within diplomacy itself is something that I feel should be talked about more enough. English, I know, is a globalized language, but going back to understanding people on a deeper level was breaking language barriers through languages. I think there would definitely be a lot less misunderstandings or a lot better communication if both parties were able to communicate in each other's languages, because you understand, because with languages, like I had mentioned many times, you're able to learn the culture as you go. And so then with that, you're not only able to now you're not only breaking linguistic barriers, but it's also you're breaking misunderstandings. And I think in our world today, there's so many misunderstandings that come with just maybe cultural a lot of cultural or unawareness that I think should definitely be mentioned a lot. So that's definitely something that really drew me to diplomacy, and I guess in the whole sense, international relations. But yeah, do you want to move on to like career prospects? I think now a lot of people might be curious as to why I even like brought up diplomacy in the first place.
All right. I will just follow up on one aspect of languages, and I guess, well, we can also discuss diplomacy, but I want to hear very, very relevant to today's world, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
What is how do you feel about the impacts of artificial intelligence and different new technologies on language learning? Because, well, evidently we have like new wearables, new technologies that make it easier to talk to someone who's speaking another language through a device, either through glasses, through phone, through other methods. And I'm sure there will be more, and this technology will continue developing. But what do you what how are you feeling about, I guess, the potential technological impact on communicating and in a diplomatic and foreign affairs context, I guess, and also I guess AI is a question of careers and the impact on the future of our work and workforce. So how how do you ever wake up and feel like, is my dream job going to be taken by AI? Is, I guess, what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, isn't that a concern that's just in the back of a lot of people's minds right now with AI and just it taking over a lot of jobs? When we're looking at it in the much more linguistic aspects, yes, it's definitely a lot more, there's a lot more prominence very rapidly in smart devices and even just applications that translate stuff for you. You can just speak through your phone, and then a person who doesn't speak your language can understand this robot just basically repeating what you just said, but translated. Um, Honestly, whilst I'd say there are definitely a lot of obvious pros and a lot of obvious cons with that. The obvious pros being obviously convenience when we're speaking in a diplomatic aspect. Just actually, I'll hold on to that for a second, but I guess in a general context, um, convenience, the obvious pro, if you're not obviously going to be able to pick up a language in overnight. And if you're a tourist, for example, just traveling, it does make things a lot more easier. I think obviously the biggest con, I think I've emphasized this through the previous question, is that you lose that aspect of being culturally aware. You haven't really personally been able to study a language enough to be able to understand its culture, understand its people. So I think it's just the unawareness aspect that, and a little bit of the ignorance that it can definitely generate, which I'm a little bit concerned about. And it could also cause for people to be a little bit more enclosed within their own sort of regional circle, rather than truly being uncomfortable in or stepping out of the comfort zone to be able to discover and learn. That's just definitely my biggest worry. Now, going back to the diplomatic aspect, I'd say I'd say it's quite a big con when we're talking about that field specifically. For most of the time, when you envision two leaders speaking from two different countries that might not particularly speak each other's languages, there's always like a device with a translator, um, an actual person speaking, or yeah, now with artificial intelligence, it's basically just a robot speaking. Um, I'm I would definitely prefer having like an actual person translating rather than a robot. Just artificial intelligence, I just want to preface isn't perfect. Shouldn't rely on it too much. It's definitely very high end, but yeah, there's just a bit of things to watch out for because it is not human, of course. So in a diplomatic aspect, I'd say that it could, besides the pro of it being convenient on both ends, it can cause for a lot of not disengagement, but again, when you're being culturally ignorant from on both parties, just being ignorant of each other's cultures and diplomatic aspect and just the way in which socially just things aren't accepted in certain cultures in certain ways, when you're not really being exposed to that through language learning, I think that can definitely be a little bit of a concern and could ignite a lot of misunderstandings going forward. So that's definitely my take on artificial intelligence. When you're learning languages yourself, artificial intelligence is honestly a very helpful tool with explaining certain things. So I'm not trying to discourage anybody listening to this being like, "Oh, don't use ChatGPT to search up how to conjugate verbs or anything like that." No, don't. I'm not trying to say that. Totally go for it. Just be aware that when it comes to actual proper communication, that you shouldn't rely on it too much.
Definitely. And I think this is an important conversation to have, at least to be aware, and a thinking part we
Yeah.
should do ourselves, obviously. But I think, yeah, as you mentioned, AI is a tool, and to put it quite bluntly, you either keep up with it or you get left behind.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is, however, important to think about the potential long-lasting impact of these choices and these developments. Yeah, and just be aware in general. Next on, I'd like to move a bit more towards diplomacy and international relations. I'd like to focus a lot more on that. So, yeah, we didn't mention already, you're drawn to diplomacy and international relations. Very briefly, or not very briefly. How did you first figure out you're interested in that? Was it the international tour or was it before that?
It was
I'm not
actually
sure.
before, I'd
Was
say. Knew from a young age I wasn't very drawn to more of the STEM related fields. I knew that deep down. I mentioned this very early on. I always felt like I was a leader inside of me, and I wanted to lead in big ways. Not saying that you can't in any of the STEM fields, but in my head, I always knew that I was attracted to sort of fields such as law, politics, and the obvious reason as to why I was drawn to international relations was mainly because of my interest in languages and also just my interest in traveling and whatnot. But I feel like beforehand, I do want to emphasize the fact that I actually didn't even want to be a diplomat beforehand. I actually wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be an English teacher. I remember like in middle school, I wanted to go and study in the UK, like English literature. But I did want to be like an international English teacher, so have an international license and be able to teach in various countries English since it is a globalized language. But yeah, also growing up, I feel like many children of immigrants can relate to the fact that you constantly just saw your parents playing the news on the TV. That was literally all I remember my early childhood being, just the news, BBC, Al Jazeera, just all Al Jazeera especially to all my Arab folks. Al Jazeera, obviously CBC, CTV News, etc. Those were just always constantly playing. Honestly, I was really interested at the time. I felt like the news really intrigued me. It's definitely quite a lot of unfortunate events that happen around. There's a lot of unfortunate events that unfortunately happen around the world, but I knew that with that unfortunate aspect, I was like, I really want to be a change maker. I think that was definitely the biggest motivator and something that I always kept in mind was just me being with my leader, with like my sort of natural interest in leadership. It was just more of me wanting to create change. And even with a lot of the initiatives that I do within the community, it's just really trying to create a positive impact on everyone. So yeah, I was originally interested in law and I still am. It's definitely something that I do have in the back of my head right now, especially when we're talking about uni applications coming up soon. Um, but I think when it came to international relations and global affairs, actually. I remember reading a book back in grade 8. It was called Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. I highly recommend it to anybody. I it's a book about geopolitics and how geopolitics is very important and just a lot of and how it really shapes up a lot of our societies and a lot of modern human sort of ideologies. And I found that book really not only was it a hard read because there were a lot of new terminology such as NATO, which I hadn't heard of before. It was or there was also just a lot of like historical references, such as like, the Cold War that I was just like that I hadn't really learned before. It just really grew my curiosity to learn more about that field. And so in the context of geopolitics and international relations and diplomacy, thanks to that book, that's when I really became interested in them. Not obviously not and with not only was it just that book, but obviously with just my overall continued cultural exposures, I definitely was interested in pursuing a career in diplomacy because diplomacy is just really about negotiating. It's about trying to come up with solutions, but in a diplomatic manner. So when we say diplomatic manner, it's in the sense that it isn't so much violent. And there's definitely, speaking about relevant times right now, there's definitely quite a lot of lack of diplomacy right now. And so, me with my sort of goal on being a change maker, I definitely want to promote diplomacy a little bit more. Actually, not only am I interested in international relations and just diplomacy, I'm also interested in just politics in general, international relations, global affairs that just as it lies specifically within just the overall context of political science. Which, speaking of university applications, I'm definitely considering as well as a program. Yeah, I just forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah, political science is definitely what I'm interested in. And I did the Forum for Young Canadians back in March just because I wanted to expand my understanding of politics a little bit more. For those who don't know, the Forum for Young Canadians, it's a part of the Rideau Hall Foundation. And for 4 days in Ottawa, they bring children from high school students, specifically aged 14 to 18 from all parts of the country to Ottawa to be able to study and understand politics, not only Canadian politics mainly, but just in general. And I think later on, it definitely just opens your eyes a little bit more to just just a lot of events happening around the world. There's a lot of just guest speakers, a lot of like simulations such as understanding land treaties. There's a lot of you're talking to a lot of like-minded youth and you're sitting down discussing and actually in the whole forum, you're broken down into groups, and those groups are supposed to be your parties, and the whole point is actually to be able to get youth to be a part of these sort of mock and like global political dialogues, understanding what it's like to run as political parties, as political candidates. I mean, Canada is a democracy, of course, so understanding democratic leadership. It was truly an eye-opening experience. I learned heavily being a part of the forum, and so actually after that forum, I really wanted to just be involved in more initiatives related. So I joined Young Politicians of Canada, which we will definitely talk about. I joined, I also at that time in March, the snap election was just called out. And I was like, I want to be involved. And so I began canvassing for my local riding MP, which was honestly so incredible. I was able to just learn so much. It was definitely a little bit scary. I'd never done anything like that before, but it was just incredible. And on election day, I actually skipped school. I was just really involved. I never felt so excited before. And from there on, I just really loved being a part of that initiative and so on and so forth. So right now, yeah, I'm definitely trying to be a little bit more involved just within the general political sense. And by general political sense, not just international relations and specifically Canadian politics, but I'd say just generally, this is, gosh, sorry about that. It's a little bit early in the morning. And it's a very not it's a topic that is not very nuanced. There's a lot of specifics that are involved with it. But yeah, no, just politics in general is definitely what I'm trying to do. I think that I highly recommend this, and I want to say this to everybody, is that you don't necessarily have to do something related to one thing. That was just always what I it was like a misconception that I had believe it's truly like a misconception. Like, you don't have to necessarily always do extracurriculars related to one thing. I highly recommend to always just explore certain fields, and I think it was through Forum for Young Canadians, which was like an experience completely different from what I was doing before, like forums and UN and whatnot. It was just general and civic engagement with all of that. I found that with having various different experiences in different fields, but then at the same time, them correlating with each other eventually, that was just something that really just opens your eyes a little bit more. Yeah.
And I'll highlight politics is not just federal elections.
It's
There's
not
so
just
much
federal
more. And I think
elections. Yeah.
yeah, that's how I got my start. So grade nine, I was doing super into tech startups, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then I discovered that municipal politics exists,
Right.
and I've been super engaged in that part for a few years. But yeah, I think it's important. Well, this is why civic education is
Civic
important,
engagement is
because
very
different
important.
issues fall under different government levels, and you cannot
You
blame
can't
education
it,
and parking on the federal government, because
it's
one is
actually, yeah.
provincial
Mm,
and one is a municipal issue. So
uh-huh.
that's a huge educational gap. I will say though, we'd love to complain that Ottawa is boring. And for anyone interested in global affairs politics, we hit the jackpot. It's a capital
Yeah.
city.
City
We are
with
a G7 country.
opportunity.
Yeah, a G7 country. So it is like has presence at the global level
Yeah.
as well. Lots of opportunities. Fortunately, we don't really have conflicts with anyone, so we're not constantly sanctioned or excluded from international events. So lots to do in Ottawa. And honestly, I'm super impressed that how it started. And you obviously have lots of passion
Yeah,
for
just
this.
wanted to say grade 10 civics was actually my favorite class. My favorite grade 10 class. I know that might not actually be a popular comment, not a shared sentiment by a lot of people, but I actually very much enjoyed the class. And you mentioning certain things being under like the jurisdiction of certain provincial, oh sorry, what am I saying? Certain levels of government, that's definitely something that a lot of people aren't aware of. And with being civically engaged, I really after and being involved in all these initiatives, And obviously learning from my grade 10 civics class, I felt like there was just a huge education gap. People really weren't aware of the fact that housing is actually a provincial responsibility, not a federal. Although, yes, we could, there are certain aspects in which the federal and the provincial governments can negotiate. But the reality is that the federal government doesn't really have direct responsibility to that, which I feel like going forward with a lot of elections, it can definitely have an impact on voter turnout, specifically when you're looking at what voters are mainly valuing or prioritizing. And it's a little bit of a concern right now, I feel like. But anyways, yeah, when you mentioned municipal politics as well, like people aren't aware of the fact that when we're talking about policing and security, for example, national security, like the army, for example, is a federal sort of responsibility. But the police is at Ottawa police or that's mainly the provincial, I'm sorry, the municipal it's a municipal responsibility. Firefighters are a municipal responsibility. Your parks, playgrounds, those are dealt by the municipal government, not to mention your traffic lights, or the roads. We're always complaining there's like potholes everywhere. But actually that's the municipality's responsibility. So yeah, those just these
True.
certain aspects here and there are definitely quite a few things that a lot of people don't realize are sort of categorized to different levels of government. It's like you said, again, it's not just the federal government. Federal politics is just as important as provincial politics as it is municipal politics. And it's really sad
I
to see
will
that. Sorry for cutting you there, but it's really just sad to see that there's not a lot of voter turnout for provincial and municipal elections, which I really am hoping to see more voter turnout results in the future for.
I will take time to celebrate, however, that there's like I noticed improvements and youth are more civically
For
engaged as
sure.
of recently, at least in my circle. But I remember in the last provincial elections, a lot of young people I know were following through, following with the news, following with the policies, generally aware and understanding of what different outcomes would mean. I think this has been especially relevant since certain funding changes to school and education that have been felt on a day-to-day level for students and youth. But again, I think yeah, it's a bit also of a chicken and egg problem because youth want a seat at the table, but at the same time, you need voter turnout of younger demographics for political candidates to start taking more notice of the demographic. I guess it's like vote more, you get hurt more, unfortunately. But so I think I guess my face did give it away earlier, but with the civics course, it was quite interesting. I think yeah, lots of doubts with the format and people forgetting half of it all of it actually by the end of school year. But I think it's a good start for sure. But yeah, definitely more could be done as well. Lots of cool organizations doing work on that
Yeah.
aspect. That that's a really good step. Yeah, I'm excited to see where
Yeah,
that
and when we're
continues.
speaking about the civics course, here in Ontario, everyone knows that it's a half course, it's an open course. We're the only province that actually has that as a mandatory, like half credit for graduation. Other provinces don't. They do have an equivalent, like optional course for students to take, but it's not required. And when I went to the Young Politicians of Canada Summit here in Ottawa, this was definitely a panel that was discussed in regard like it was yeah civic education reforms. It was definitely a panel discussed, and there was a lot of debate on whether there should be reforms. And I personally think that yeah, no, definitely there definitely should be. Many people don't really take it seriously. I think that's mainly because I don't know, but there's so many things that are desensitized, but when it comes to politics in itself, or just even civic engagement as a whole, just really sensitized. Like a lot of people don't really feel comfortable speaking about it, almost like it's taboo. And I feel like, yeah, I really want to try to like break the stigma going forward. Yeah.
I will say to play devil's advocate from my personal experience of in political or civic engagement, it takes a lot of effort and dedication. I don't think it's something that can be done in a 6 month course
Yeah,
or a 3 month course for semester schools. But essentially, I think it's a good starting point in that it
for
provides
sure.
you with the basic knowledge of what different levels of government do and such. But I think the actual finding your civic identity, your political identity in that sense takes so many conversations and so many experiences to get to a point where you feel like, okay, I feel like I know what I'm advocating for or I know what I'm supporting. I think it's a bit of a I don't think everyone would be interested in doing that because depending on your interests, if you're not in if you're not super passionate about humanities or to a specific level, civic education, it might be not as interesting. I do think, however, there's potential with possibly implementing civic education in every aspect of education in general. So when you're learning about technology and computer science, you're also learning about the civic aspects of regulating technology, which levels of government do what falls under what, and such. So I think if that was that's a that's certainly an approach that can be explored. History class, of course, I learned a lot about what I remember from civics because I had a
Yeah.
wonderful history teacher. But otherwise, yeah, I think there's lots of approaches. We obviously need a lot of many voices on the table to make sure we have all the perspectives and such.
The
So yeah,
youth
I think we're
voices.
definitely, if you're teaching something to youth, co-design with them. I don't know why we leave them last, but yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on, but still in international relations and diplomacy. Again, you did touch on this earlier. But if you could name one thing that people misunderstand or overlook, especially youth, about the world of diplomacy, what do you think it is from your experience?
Yeah. One thing many people, especially youth, misunderstand about diplomacy is that it's not just about like high profile negotiations between like presidents, prime ministers. That is definitely a big part of it. I think the majority of diplomacy like happens quietly and behind the scenes. It's through relationship building, and I mentioned relationship building well, indirectly through linguistics. But yeah, listening and just developing trust, or sorry, relationship building, listening, and trust developed over time between diplomats, civil servants, communities as well. In diplomacy, or just anything can really just be diplomatic, specifically within the just the communication part. I think in general, I think a lot of the time we have the tendency to just feel a little bit inferior. It's normal, but inferior or just diplomacy is just basically trying to prevent violence from breaking out. And it's definitely something that I feel should definitely be. I think diplomacy should raise a little bit more, or sorry, there should be more awareness when it comes to being diplomatic, just because it's basically a way in which tensions can sort of be cooled down a bit, so on and so forth. So yeah, a lot of youth imagine like diplomacy as like dramatic one day deals or like trying like treaty signings, when in reality it's long, gradual process like finding common ground and managing differences, often on issues like trade, cultural exchange, environmental policy, migration, not just war and peace. Another overlooked point is that diplomacy is as much about understanding cultures as it is about politics. Diplomats need to know languages, they need to know history, customs, and social nuances. So being effective means knowing how to connect with people, not just to debate policies. So in short, diplomacy isn't only about the spotlight moment, it's about patience, like cultural intelligence, and just the behind the scenes, the BTS, the quiet work of just building like bridges. But yeah,
For sure. No, I think I'll slightly blame movies and shows for unrealistically portraying career
like
paths.
it's not just
Um,
always like political thrillers and all that.
no, I think there should be a little disclaimer. This is not what a career in law looks like in Suits, and this is not
It's
what
not
diplomacy
suits.
is all about.
Truly
In
isn't.
it never is. I'm pretty sure legal dramas. The medical dramas as well are probably misrepresentative of the medical field as well.
Mhm.
Diplomacy, I think we hear about the glorious moments portrayed in movies of this conflict happened and this embassy solved things. But friendly reminder, being a diplomat and being in diplomacy is a year-round job, and these moments happen once every few years at best. And behind an ambassador, there's dozens of people also working on diplomatic efforts. It's not a single person. There's a lot more than just being the face of a country. But yeah, you bring up some really great points. And yeah, I if so to relate all this to a specific experience you've had, or I guess from the spaces you've been in, especially I guess the Kake Kakehashi
Kakehashi.
exchange and Kakehashi
Yeah, Kakehashi.
and the the Jeju Forum
Yeah,
in Korea.
Jeju.
So I'd like to hear more about those spaces. What surprised you the most when you were there?
Yeah.
Culturally, politically, food, tourism,
Oh my
anything.
goodness.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So for those who are curious of how I got involved, they were all a part of ICP. It was a little bit more special in the sense that I actually wasn't expecting to be a part of it. I didn't apply directly. Jeju, I did. Won the Ontario Japan Bowl 2024 with my team winning first place in the entire province. And we thought that after we got our $100 check for winning first place, that would just be it. And it was really fun. We actually prepared like months prior. We had the language coach out, and we were like really preparing because basically the Japan Bowl is just a competition that's about like Japanese language, geography, history, culture, so on. And yeah, we prepared like a few months prior, and then we participated and we happened to win first place, which is really incredible. Shout out to my teammates Jenna and Jay. We did incredible. And all of a sudden, one day I just get an email that's, hey, you've been selected or to apply to this exchange in Japan for 1 week in the summer. I was like, oh my, and it is fully funded by the Canadian and Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. And so I was like, I got so excited. So I applied and I got interviewed out of 15, and they were mainly looking for six. And I just got selected out of the six to participate in this exchange. It's a so Kakehashi, for those who don't know, basically means bridge in Japanese. So the whole point of this program is to be able to bridge North America, because Kakehashi is also for US part. There's also the US version of Japan Bowl. So yeah, Kakehashi just means bridging North America to Japan. So six Canadians and maybe 14, 15 Americans. And we participated in this exchange in Japan. It was truly so the whole point of the exchange is to be able to really like not just visit Japan for touristic purposes. Yes, you are there as a tourist and you're touring the country, but you're also looking at it from actually a diplomatic level as well, and from a social level, from a cultural level, etc. Like you're just changing your lens from how you typically would look at it. Like it's not just a vacation or a holiday. It's truly a learning experience while you're being there. So yeah, on like the first day, the Canadians, we and the Americans both went to their respective embassies. We went to the Canadian embassy, we spoke to diplomats. It was actually that a career in diplomacy actually was considered because of my trip to Japan and visiting the Canadian embassy, which was just honestly incredible. I should have mentioned that earlier. But yeah, it was so incredible. And not only are you there visiting places, but you're also speaking to people, you're meeting with people. We met with like Her Imperial Highness Princess Takamaro, and we met with the former Prime Minister Kishida's wife, First Lady. And it was so cool meeting her at the Japanese Parliament. Oh my goodness, it was such a surreal experience. And we did like a few day exchange. So the whole program itself was just 1 week, but honestly, it feels really longer than that. We got to so the program itself, it tries to take its participants to a specific prefecture of Japan to learn more about that prefecture and its cultural traditions. Japan, I'd say, as much as it is a homogenous country, ethnically, culturally, it is very diverse. Like each prefecture definitely really celebrates its own tradition. So we went to Fukushima, and for those who don't know, Fukushima is the prefecture where the 2011 nuclear disaster happened. As well, the tsunami hit other parts of Japan, but Fukushima was hit the worst, unfortunately. And while we were there, we actually went to a lot of revitalization, the summits and buildings that basically promoted and highlighted sort of the revitalization plans and the initiatives that were going on to be able to, for example, remove radiation from that was spreading around in the region. Beyond, we also got to stay with host families in Fukushima for one night. It was so cool getting to speak to my host mom, and also just because I spoke Japanese. Actually, yeah, no, being able to speak Japanese with her was just honestly so incredible. That's what I really mean when I say, like, when I emphasize truly being able to speak a language. Um, just being able to speak with her is just so incredible, and living in her house, it was so cool. I've never done an exchange, like a formal study abroad, but now I really want to. Looking back, it was so cool. And to the locals, of course, and just engaging in all of these activities was just so incredible. That's why, like I said, Kakehashi wasn't really just about going to Japan for tourism. It was really just more than that. Um, and by the end, we did a project on how we wanted to. I'm just talking about my experience at this point, but I think for those who are definitely interested in the future of doing Kakehashi, I definitely recommend it. And by the end, we basically proposed like a project in how we would continue to mention Japan going forward, or mention Kakehashi, or just or speak about something related to Japan after our trip. I ran a club at school called Critique on Global Affairs. It's actually one of the first clubs that I got. Like I, the executives who ran the club, actually senior executives, got back to me and told me that back in grade 9 that I became an executive. So that was really cool. It's a political/journalism club. It's really good and I love it so much. And yeah, when I got back, I spoke over the topic of over tourism, especially after COVID, Japan, and when Japan opened its borders, it experienced quite a lot of over tourism, and there was a lot of anti-tourist sentiment, especially in places such as Tokyo. No, not in no, sorry, Kyoto. Kyoto. Like when you learn languages, you don't just pronounce like Tokyo. Like I don't really like saying that. I like saying Tokyo or not Kyoto. It's Kyoto. Kyoto. But yeah, there were like certain chores for banned for certain parts of the cities. And so I spoke about that in my political journalism club. And I submitted an article I submitted that article as my final project. And it was great. And for Jeju Youth Forum, so that was a part of ICP. I always wanted to go to Korea, so I just applied. So Jeju Youth Forum is with the United Nations, and it's to basically discuss it's basically in to discuss and promote the 17 the UN's international development plans. So yeah, I wrote like an article specifically focusing on goals 10 and 16 with the overall topic regarding promoting multiculturalism in multicultural societies. That was, I think, the topic of my essay. And when you go to Korea, it's in Jeju Island. You do stay in Seoul for a few days, which is very cool. But specifically speaking of the forum in itself, yeah, the forum brings kids from high school students, youth from all parts of the world. There were students from Thailand, Vietnam, Finland, Hawaii, us, of course, the Canadians. There were people from Oman. Oh my gosh, Japan, obviously Korea, China, Cambodia. It was a lot of people, but yeah, I made so many incredible friends and it was so cool. Um, and you basically discuss in your certain assigned panels you basically create a project and you make a presentation in regards to like the essay that you wrote, but just to obviously like a larger audience. And it's not just like any of these fancy stuff as well. Like you do tours and actually you stay in this huge building and you share a room, you share like even this sort of an apartment complex. It's really cool with like girl. I shared like a sort of like this apartment with like a girl from Finland, Hawaii, and China, and then there was me, the Canadian. It was just so cool, like sharing each other's cultures, talking, and obviously just interacting with a lot of the kids. There were a lot of icebreaker activities, and we toured around the beautiful island of Jeju. And yeah, we did like a cultural show, and my gosh, it was just incredible. It was such an incredible experience. I really want to go back to Jeju. And I mentioned that you do get to stay in Seoul. So yeah, we the Canadians, a lot of the people in the forum just flew directly to Jeju to participate in the forum, but we flew a few days prior to Seoul to be able to explore the city. We had a tour guide who actually used to live in Ottawa but moved back to Korea. So yeah, she was a mutual connection of our chaperone. And so we explored the city, we went to Myeongdong, Gangnam. I spoke Korean, so I definitely connected a lot with the locals there. Like, we went to Kang, yeah, other many places, and, like, we saw, like, the Han River, Hankang, which what it's called in Korean. I did a lot of shopping, a lot of damage for sure. Nothing beats the shopping in Korea, especially in the skincare. My gosh. I spent so much money, but hey, I had literally the time of my life and like visiting the convenience stores. Like you see all of these things on social media. Same thing with Japan. Like you see all of these portrayals of these sort of like cultural elements on social media, but when you experience them yourself in your real life, it's truly just so incredible, so surreal. It's honestly like a fever dream. So I had so much fun in Korea. We visited quite a lot of in Seoul. We visited like the we visited Gyeongbokgung Palace, and we wore like traditional, which is really cool. It's really beautiful. And obviously, when you're there yourself, you're like really just living the history as you're just walking around. And our tour guide was explaining a lot of the cultural elements. Now, the thing is, I'm a huge K drama fan, so going to Gyeongbokgung Palace, I could just envision sorta how things would be from a lot of the dramas that from the many hundreds of dramas that I've watched. Yeah, I know. It was truly just living in those I felt like I was living in those dramas, to say the least. But yeah,
Travel is wonderful,
travel
and
is wonderful, you guys.
I think I was like we weren't close back then, but I had your story, so I was like I kind of followed along with the stories. I love social media for this. I got to experience.
Like,
Okay, that
living
sounds wrong.
vicariously through my stories.
Yeah, every like in summer is the most exciting time for to go on Instagram. Everyone is traveling, everyone's attending concerts. Really cool to check out what everyone is doing. But yeah, I think everyone should try at least a few times to travel to different places and be open minded and build awareness, I guess. But yeah, I still staying in diplomacy. I'd like to circle to the identity topic that came up at the very start. So the hijab, it's a journey. It's definitely a process, but I wanted to focus on how you feel or what your journey was like with the hijab in diplomatic and the youth and professional spaces. What kind of representation do you feel is still missing? What's your thought process when you're a room and you're the youngest person, you're the only girl, or you're the only hijabi? What's that like?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is definitely quite a lack of hijabis in a lot of diplomatic and youth spaces. And I feel like, in a sense, the reason why is because a lot of, at least people that I've spoken to, were not only just scared, but a lot of the time discouraged. And I feel really sad that there is this sort of discouragement being spread, at least for me, in a sense, even being a part of those spaces myself. I definitely did feel really out of place sometimes, just being very different. But going back to the discouragement aspect, I myself was feeling a little bit discouraged, but I knew deep down that I was a unique person, and so I just um embraced my uniqueness and went on from there. Not only is it just in like youth diplomatic spaces, I think when it just relates to personal identity, like in school, for example, I was really into sports. I loved rugby, but I was like the only hijabi on the team. It definitely made me feel out of place just because like I was dressed modestly. Like the other girls, I didn't wear shorts, like I wore leggings, so on. And I didn't see any other girls really like in sports tryouts, such as in soccer or basketball, or even in clubs. Actually, like I never really saw many participating in clubs. Not saying that there aren't at all. That's not. I'm not trying to say that whatsoever. Um, but that was just at least from my personal experience. It was definitely a little bit sad. But going back to youth and diplomatic spaces, I would say that it's slowly starting to get better just because of the prevalence of social media, but also just overall opportunities in general. And I think a lot of people are starting to there I feel like it's become a trend to embrace your uniqueness and difference. I think for me at first, a lot of people might relate to this, but for me at least, I it was definitely not easy at first. Hijab is definitely, like you said, like quite a journey. It's not easy. Like even when I went to Japan and Korea, like I was the only hijabi. And I definitely got a lot of questions from some people who weren't really aware of like Islamic practices, like or just Islam as a whole. Why would you wear it and whatnot? I'm really grateful though. I will say that I was never directly discriminated. I think the biggest people out there who definitely feel um the largest amount of sort of trauma or rather like conflict within themselves internally would definitely be those who experience like racism and relevant experiences to that. Thankfully, I haven't, but I do know people close to me who have, and it's definitely sad and scary to say the least. But yeah, no, overall, I think when I first started to wear it, it was really hard to accept these sorts of things. But as I'm going forward now, I definitely feel a little bit more comfortable. Not to say though that it's not easy at times. It really isn't, but yeah.
For sure. And I think, yeah, the process of feeling comfortable in your own skin is definitely like a long one, I guess. But yeah, I guess shout out to other movements that have made
Yeah.
representation of different groups. Particularly, I think the women in STEM movement is very relevant personally, since I'm in the STEM space. And I know sometimes it can feel like there's too much of these movements, but truly we still need more. I'm starting a university program with about 20% girls. My university is actually very, very male dominated. So even even in, yeah, first world European universities, we're experiencing this. Again, there are complex social social and environmental factors, I'm assuming, that shape these trends, and certain fields will have different compositions, but I think there's still effort that needs to be made to make everyone feel comfortable. Representation is crucial. Seeing people that look like you, that shared paths, or you have things in common with, can be extremely, extremely necessary to feel seen and feel heard and feel like you can do things. When you're looking at your dream career and everyone looks different than you, has completely different backgrounds than you, sometimes you'll or a lot of times you'll be stuck in a loop of self-doubt of like, can I do this? And seeing, I guess, representation at the end of the day is huge. I guess, yeah, since we're on this topic, I'd like to zoom out a bit and hear more about inclusion. What would true inclusion look like to you in international youth spaces? And I guess we can also include a bit of post-secondary education. And if you feel like the current model that's being available across, well, secondary and post-secondary education, is it fit for globally minded people? Is it setting us up for an inclusive community where everyone feels comfortable? Is it the right approach? What do you think?
Oh, that is a very hard question. Like, honestly, I feel like many youth, this is just generally speaking, in like touching up on inclusivity as well. It's definitely important to always um promote like an inclusive platform. Yeah, many youth think that like global engagement is only for those who can afford like expensive programs or travel abroad, or m- making like exchange programs, conferences, like maybe a lot more affordable would definitely be one. And maybe even just, I think inclusivity as a whole, definitely through like diversity and maybe representing underrepresented groups for sure. I definitely don't see like a lot of Black women or hijabi women, um, or even people of disabilities, for example, being a part of certain things. So maybe just even being direct about it. I feel like sometimes at times like there's a little bit of this fear in our societies that this shouldn't be direct because there's like cancel culture. And I think to maybe setting like certain boundaries would definitely be able to improve the inclusivity platform for a lot more people. And too often, youth are spoken to at rather than listened to. And so, giving young and globally minded people meaningful roles as well, just not just like symbolic seats, I think would definitely build a lot more genuine inclusivity. And I think, lastly, and this one I think is a lot easier nowadays, it's just proper like I think advertising for just general opportunities in general. I feel like we're also just being advertising them in a way in which it can definitely be encouraging to youth and people when we're speaking about. I mentioned like crazy programs. To be honest, it doesn't really have to be that, since not everyone has traveling is a privilege. Like for example, not many people have that, and so maybe having digital accessibility to strong virtual platforms for cross cultural dialogue and collaboration can definitely improve that, allowing for more meaningful engagement. Yeah,
Sorry, 100%. I think you touched on an important aspect of privilege. Unfortunately, I guess diplomacy and international affairs is one field where privilege has a huge impact, especially when organizations like the United Nations until recently only offered unpaid internships, which means only people who can afford to work for free are able to access such opportunities. There's travel, as you mentioned, is not accessible to everyone, and a lot of exchanges cost 5,000, six
yep.
thousand,
And I
$8,000.
definitely want to
Not very
say that
affordable.
for the two forums that I did, one of them was fully funded, and then the other one was like partially funded. I did apply for a bursary, but like you said, like it's very expensive. It's definitely like a huge misconception. Um, that, but also I want to say that it's a huge misconception in the sense that just because you aren't financially able to, it doesn't mean that you can't be a part of it. Um, it- Money and finances just definitely make things a lot more easier in a sense, but at the same time, I definitely don't want people to be discouraged. I was always discouraged and thought that in order to do a lot of certain like extracurriculars, even sports, for example, I had to come from a pretty well off background because that's what it seemed like for most of the people that I knew that were being a part of them. But reality is that there's definitely way more to just programs that require money. There's definitely a lot that you could do for free. And and this might even like potentially begin like a creative, it might as well like spark creativity amongst like individuals to begin making initiatives to support people in these same spaces or who can relate. So yeah, just don't think that money should stop you from just pursuing what you love is the easiest way to put it.
I guess the call to action here is for youth. Take advantage of the resources you have.
Mhm.
School clubs are usually free. School athletics are usually free, if not very affordable. There are lots of digital platforms as well that you can look into. And for organizations, this is a call to, if you have funding, might as well make things more accessible. Because as much as we like to see the best of it, it does compound when few individuals have access to endless opportunities that they can pay their way into. And when another other individuals don't have the same access, and by the time you hit university, by the time you graduate out of university, resumes will look completely different, and that will determine what kind of opportunities you have access to after. Also, luckily, we're based in Ottawa, so that's a super lucky component for I guess being involved in politics. It's a capital city. Other big cities and provincial capital cities might have the same will have similar opportunities. However, people in rural areas, students in rural areas, students in smaller towns and remote towns might not have or will struggle to find such opportunities. So I think there's still a lot more work to be done in that inclusivity point of being making sure everyone has access to opportunities. Can never be perfect, but we can try. I guess yeah, we've had a really good conversation. Yeah, we always have a lot to talk about. There's still so much more to go through, but unfortunately, we can't have a 10-hour long podcast episode. So, I guess to wrap up, I wanted to ask a few fireside questions, I guess, just a bit like shorter answers, one sentence type of questions, just to hear a bit more Flash Marie. So I guess, yeah, a bit more faster pace. What drives you to do what to do, especially when it feels hard or uncertain, in one sentence? If you could, an affirmation, I guess, of sorts.
Ooh, I definitely think what motivates me or continues just drive me forward a lot of the time is just just the passion for it. I felt like when I went through like my period of burnout, I really had to sit down with myself and really ask what really brought me joy. Was what I was doing like fulfilling? I did a lot of things like school initiatives, for example, that really didn't fulfill me. And at the end of the day, I just felt really like miserable and I would constantly beat myself up about it. And when I burnt out, I didn't really have a good relationship with myself, but I knew that I had to really find something at the end of the day that would really bring me forward again. And I think when I discovered my love for politics and international relations is I joined initiatives that I felt comfortable in, that I felt welcomed in. I truly felt that the end goal of me really pursuing a career that I loved was going to be like a great motivator. So yeah, that's definitely like something that really continues to motivate me. It's just really just having genuine love and passion for something. I remember meeting with this incredible person at the Forum for Young Canadians. She's actually 15 and she's going to university. She is really smart. Shout out to Leah Park. Um, but I asked her like, "Wow, you do so many." She's like a dancer. She does hip hop and ballet, and she studies finance. And she's going into Sauder's UBC for finance, and she does so many incredible things. I'm like, "How do you do this?" And she's, like, "I have a love and passion for these things, like these hobbies of mine, and what I'm involved in. It's really what drives me forward." And I really took her word for that because when I did the things that I actually wanted to because I did feel scared of people's judgment. And I think I definitely learned to just break free from having to constantly feel like people are going to judge me. There's always going to be judgment. In reality, it's that truth. But I think it's just the way that you interpret it is definitely how you'll be able to go forward with that. So yeah, I just feel like find something that you genuinely really are passionate about. If that's definitely like a hard question though, and it's not easy. I mean, it's easier in the sense, it's easier when you discover that passion a little bit early on, but you never really know. I definitely recommend to just do as many things as possible, really speak with people, network, step out of your comfort zone 100%, because you won't really proceed from point A to point B if you're just really not willing to go through hurdles and so on and so forth. Yeah, that was definitely like a chunk of a lot of things here and there, but find your passion, get out of your comfort zone in reality. I think from there on, that's what will definitely continue to drive you forward.
Makes sense. And gentle reminder, finding a passion is not linear. It's not
It's
easy,
not
and it's
linear, it's
also
not easy.
a process. Yep. Okay. In one sentence, what in 5 years, what kind of global citizen do you hope to be?
Oh,
Not just the job or the commitments or the resume, but how do you show up in the world?
I hope to be somebody that is inspiring and someone that breaks barriers. I think in the position where I'm at, I'm a woman of a very, I'm a visible minority, an obvious one. I think I definitely want to, and I mentioned this, I want to be a change maker. So I want to be a change maker and someone who breaks barriers and speaks for those who can't.
The good news, I think you're already starting to do that, and you're doing great work. So keep keep going, and yeah, you're really inspiring. I think yeah, every time I talk to you, I come out super like re-energized and inspired. So yeah, I guess keep being yourself in the same kind of wavelength. What gives you hope about our generation?
I think what gives me hope about our generation is just the fact that we have access to so many resources. And it's really great to see a lot of people prioritizing those resources. And I think in the digital age, especially, it's a lot easier to access things more than ever now. I think the biggest in the previous generations, it was just there's a lot of divide, but obviously that was just because there wasn't really there weren't really convenient means to be able to communicate. But I feel like now there's definitely a lot less barriers. So that definitely gives me a lot more hope for our generation.
For sure. And I'll never change my mind about this. Or maybe I will. I think we're the luckiest generation to ever be born.
We
Gen
very
Z,
are.
the best. We were born just before things are going wrong, and we're born at a time where we have opportunities. I'm so endlessly grateful for everything that I've been able to do because I know for a fact that a lot of what we do, women's rights, women being a woman present in with a voice in society, we would not have been able to do this in the same way 100 years ago. We would not have been able to be active as youth in with the same level of access not long ago. We would, yeah, I'm looking forward to movements like Vote 16 that are trying to bring more youth to the table and such. But we're the luckiest generation to be born. That is my hot take for today.
For sure.
But also, yeah, I guess it's your turn though. Now, what's your hot take? One hot take you have about education, youth activism, or international relations? A really hot take.
A really hot take. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I'd say that to like travel, conferences, and programs, as much as I don't want to say that they wouldn't really promote, they're not, you don't really necessarily need them. I definitely would say that. Being, I- I'd definitely say that it should definitely be a part of it. I don't know if that's a hot take though. I think my hot take would just be like education isn't enough. I think you definitely need to be a little bit more involved outside of just school.
No, I get that. I think, mm,
I don't know if that was a
I
hot
think
take.
it's No, like I guess like impact is weird. Like you don't know what's gonna be most impactful in your life. I've been hugely impacted by random events that I've been to, or sometimes I'll be literally out of a slump after like a coffee chat with a friend.
Uh-huh.
Or yeah, I guess impact and inspiration come from the randomest places and exchanges, like you mentioned, are a week at an exchange can be more impactful than any other week in your life.
Yeah.
I can see that. And yeah, I mostly agree. I guess to give listeners a little takeaway, an action to take away from this episode. I guess if you could give those who are listening and probably wondering how to break into international spaces or find their voice, what is one small step that they can take this week towards that?
I think truly just a small step would be just maybe even mm, stepping out of your comfort zone, to be honest. I feel like for me personally, it was just about speaking to even teachers about it. I spoke to a lot of teachers about this, go to school and just speak about what you're passionate about, enlighten them a little bit of like your vision. And from there on, just kind of, even by yourself, just create a roadmap of where you see yourself and what you want to do. And even if you're not sure, just try to make something up on the spot, to be honest. I feel like that would definitely be like a small step. And then from there on, just like you would, when you're solving problems, try to create like a step by step. It doesn't have to be articulate and perfect, but just have a vision, I'd say.
For sure. And if you need something passive, I'd also add probably exposing yourself to content about whatever you're interested
Yeah.
in. This is advice that one of my favorite podcasts actually emphasizes a lot. Anything from anything goes. Yeah, one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. And I guess we'll wrap up with one final question. If you could leave listeners with a recommendation, a book, a show, or podcast, or a film, or a newsletter, if you will, anything that you'd recommend that really shaped your worldview and you think everyone should check out, what would it be and why?
A gate book. I actually, I think my biggest inspiration was honestly YouTube. Can I recommend a YouTuber?
100%.
So there's this one YouTuber. He is a nomad, an American nomad, expat, and his YouTube channel is called Damon Dominique. And he basically travel the world. He travels the world. He's a polyglot. And I definitely recommend his videos. They do definitely touch up quite on a lot of the aspects of careers and life. And he's definitely quite a unique. He's not just like any travel YouTuber. Travel YouTubers or nomads try to tell you about the culture of one place. I think his YouTube channel is definitely a little bit unique in the sense that he dives into a little bit more of the philosophical analogy. I recommend Damon Dominique. I also recommend in terms of books for my book nerds, my bookworms, Tim Marshall. Any book by Tim Marshall is definitely really good. Prisoners of Geography. I'm currently reading the book by him, The Age of Walls, and it talks about identity politics. His books are a little bit more specific, a little bit of a hard read, but if you definitely do want to start off this, just maybe even just start like, building off with curiosity and just learning as you go. I definitely recommend the author Tim Marshall and his book Prisoners of Geography, which really like kickstarted things for me personally. Yeah, I'd say that's it.
Very nice recommendation. Yeah, I guess to end off, you are the content you consume. So, yeah, maybe being intentional about what you consume can be a good start, even to the question before this one. But yeah, thank you so much for being here
Thank you
today.
so
I
much for having me. I really enjoyed this podcast. It's my first podcast episode. It's really honored.
more first. But yeah, a wonderful conversation. We'll talk more, I guess, and I'm excited to see where you go in the next few years in your career. I'm betting that you'll be a huge inspiration. I'm sure you'll accomplish what you're out to do, and you're already doing great. So, yeah, keep going.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure you'll also do great things. And I definitely see us going very far in life. So, yeah, no, just encouraging each other is definitely something that definitely really helps with the momentum of keep of going forward. So, yeah,
Good content and good friends
yeah,
are the key to success.
exactly.
Let's leave it with that. But yeah, thank you so much and have fun at your event later
Thank
today.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.